surrounded by this emergency food paste, nearly 200,000 boxes of it. And in the meantime, it's supposed to have gone to Sudan, where children are literally dying on the streets because they can't get this stuff. And that contract was one of the ones that were stopped.
Welcome to Global Dispatches, a podcast for the foreign policy and global development communities and anyone who wants a deeper understanding of what is driving events in the world today. I'm your host, Mark Leon Goldberg. I am a veteran international affairs journalist and the editor of UN Dispatch. Enjoy the show. As of July 1st, what remains of USAID's programming is being folded into the State Department. The independent agency, created 64 years ago to advance American values and support global humanitarian causes, is no more. With USAID's demise comes a staggering human cost. The Lancet on July 1st published a study finding that more than 14 million people, a third of them children, will die by 2030 if current U.S. foreign aid cuts remain in place. Behind those numbers are countless stories of tragedy and heroism. My guest today, Katharine Houreld, is the bureau chief for East and Southern Africa for The Washington Post, who recently reported from Sudan on the devastating impact of the swift and sudden cutoff of American aid. We begin our conversation with the stories of individuals living through it, from the grieving mother of a toddler who died of an easily preventable chest infection, to the soup kitchen volunteers fighting to keep their neighbors alive as food supplies vanish. We recorded our conversation on the day USAID shut down, and I thought it was vitally important to bring you this episode, featuring firsthand accounts of how the collapse of U.S. humanitarian assistance is fueling the world's largest humanitarian crisis. As with more and more of these episodes, we recorded our conversation live via Substack. To join us live when I record one of these interviews, please go to globaldispatches.org and sign up. And while you're there, you can get a paying subscription to help me continue to bring you these vitally important yet woefully undercovered global stories. It's what I do best, and I do it for you, and I'm able to do it because of your support. So thank you. Now here is my conversation with Katharine Houreld of The Washington Post. So you had an absolutely brilliant article earlier this week, really over the weekend, in the Washington Post, detailing the impact of USAID cuts to Sudan, the world's largest humanitarian crisis by the numbers. So we are speaking on July 1st, which is the day that USAID officially ended. Much of what, after 64 years, USAID, as we know it, is no more. What remains of USAID programming, such as it is, has been folded into the State Department. Earlier today, The Lancet, I don't know if you saw this, published a research report showing that if these USAID cuts remain in effect over the next 5 years, it would result in an excess of 14 million deaths, about a third of which would be from children. Your brilliant piece in the Washington Post puts a human face on the impact of these cuts. And I wanted to start our conversation where you start your piece, with a story of Omran.
Well, I mean, we stumbled on this completely by accident. And I have to say, I was a bit worried going to Sudan because it can be quite difficult sometimes to move around or get permissions to do things, that we would find it hard to tell the story of these impacts. But unfortunately, these stories were everywhere you looked. And we had gone to this village clinic to talk to the doctor there because they had been due to receive medicine and things like solar panels to keep vaccines for children cool, other aid like that from the International Rescue Committee. And when we were talking to the doctor, I asked her about preventable deaths, people who had died who might have been able to have been saved if she had received this equipment and medicine. And she said, oh, well, they're actually burying somebody right next door right now. So I said, oh, well, I'm so sorry to hear that. Who is he? She said, oh, it's a little boy. It's a little boy who came in. His mom was looking for medicine. He had a chest infection, which is quite common with small children. She said, if I had antibiotics, I probably could have helped them. I was supposed to get those antibiotics. But after you finish talking to me, why don't you go over and talk to his mother? So we did. And we walked into this courtyard where there was a lot of women crying, praying, sitting with his mother, rubbing her on the back. And the thing that really struck me is in this sea of grief-stricken women, there was one little boy running around with a lollipop, laughing and playing. And that was the twin brother of the boy who died. And he didn't know his brother was dead because his mother couldn't bear to tell him. And she said, one day, I'll just tell him that his brother went to paradise. But for now, I'm going to keep telling him that he's in the hospital and that he's going to come home soon.
I mean, the mother tried her best to get what apparently is just like very basic medicine that was just completely inaccessible.
It's so unfortunate. I mean, the Sudanese healthcare system has been devastated by this war. There's been so many attacks on hospitals, attacks on aid workers, areas that have been cut off by fighting. So people desperately need these primary healthcare clinics. A lot of the time they can't travel to other areas because of insecurity. So if they can go somewhere where they can get the most basic kinds of care, and I'm talking about things like antibiotics, I'm talking about equipment that can help a woman deliver a baby. I'm not even talking about a C-section. I'm just talking about basic things that have been used for years and can save a lot of lives. Things like vaccines, for example, that really makes a huge difference to a community. And without that, people die.
You describe like bare shelves in this clinic that once were fully stocked. What do we know about what happened to those medicines? And you say this particular clinic's, it's supposed to serve like 64,000 people and used to have like a robust warehouse, even in the midst of this conflict. What happened to those medicines?
So it never really had a robust warehouse, I would say. I did ask the doctor, when I went there, can I see your pharmacy? Because they had several rooms in this. And she laughed and she said, you're sitting right in front of it. And she pointed to a filing cabinet, just a bare filing cabinet. And there was like less than one shelf of medicines there. There was like a box and a half of oral rehydration salts, which is not much in the middle of a cholera epidemic. There was a couple of like broad spectrum antibiotics, not the right one to treat Omran. Couple of face masks. That was about it, to be honest. I mean, my personal cupboard upstairs in my bathroom is better stocked with medicines than this clinic serving 64,000 people.
You write that they were due to have received a bunch of medicines, but because of the shuttering and the freeze of U.S. foreign aid, that medicine never came. Is that right?
Unfortunately, yeah, due to receive them at the beginning of the year, but then the stop work order came, everything shut down. Then I forget, the project was like, said it was going to be reactivated, then it was terminated, then it was partially reactivated. Then everybody who had been able to distribute the money had been fired. So it was just complete chaos. It's not easy to move medicine into a war zone. It's not easy once you've moved it in there to get the permissions that you need, perhaps to take it across front lines or to get the equipment that you need. It's such a difficult operating environment in Sudan. So the fact that they had done all these things that have taken so much work and everything was about to be delivered and cut off. And then people just die. They've been dying before, they continue to die, but they didn't have to.
In your piece, you also tell the story of some of Sudan's emergency response rooms. Now, by way of background, in April 2023, as the civil war erupted, principally as a conflict between two warring generals, a civil society movement that had formed prior to the civil war that was broadly a pro-democracy civil society movement, quickly established what they called emergency response rooms, which were kind of very local responses to local humanitarian needs. These could be everything from like local soup kitchens to like daycare centers. These kind of sprang up throughout the country. And, I've had representatives of these emergency response rooms on the podcast before. And what I find so remarkable about them is not only are they delivering local aid according to local needs, but they also have this kind of national bureaucratic structure that, as these two rival generals are tearing the country apart, this rival bureaucratic humanitarian aid structure that's very locally driven is one thing that's still kind of cohering the country. Yet these emergency response rooms, which again are mostly like soup kitchens around the country, received most of their funds from USAID, and that's all been cut off?
Unfortunately, yes. So last year they received 77% of their funds from US and the rest from a variety of sources.
Which was like about $17 million, right? We're not talking about huge sums of money in like a budgetary sense.
Yeah, I think it was maybe like $12 million.
$12 million, okay.
Because they're so flat, they operate extremely efficiently, and they would receive this money because it was impossible for the aid agencies to bring commodities across the front lines. And what they would do is they would try and buy it locally and have a soup kitchen where maybe everybody in need could have one meal a day. They smuggled medicine across the front lines. They helped people escape the war in the early days, and they did it at huge personal risk. Everybody who works for the emergency response rooms knows somebody who's been tortured, who's been killed, who's been kidnapped. Because they cross the front lines, people often consider them spies. The military is suspicious of them because of their pro-democracy history. The RSF is suspicious of them.
And the RSF is the paramilitary that is probably committing a genocide out in Western Sudan in Darfur, just for people's reference, the rival to the army as in the Civil War.
You have the military and the paramilitary fighting each other. And then all these people in the middle, especially the emergency response rooms. I mean, the guy that I met on this occasion called Momin, who had been arrested 40 times, more than 40 times during pro-democracy demonstrations, shot in the arm. This arm was partially paralyzed, had chemical burns on this side from the spray that they would spray to try to break up demonstrations, which is like really concentrated form of tear gas. And his wife had been arrested multiple times. And he got up at 5 a.m. every morning and rode through the neighborhood, giving out chlorine tabs and leaflets about cholera to all the tea ladies, everybody gathered around a communal well. And he was really trying hard to keep this deadly disease out of his neighborhood. And he had 10 other volunteers doing it. And when people say things like, well, what are the Sudanese doing to help their own country? It's like, you know what they're doing? They're doing this. They're getting arrested, tortured. They're getting killed. They're getting up to ride around on bicycles to give out medicine because they don't have anything else. Then we took most of their money away. They're still doing it. They're still raising funds from the diaspora. It's just taking them longer. They can do less. They can help less people. But they were doing a tremendous job. And they were keeping many millions of people alive.
So, like, again, this was, as I said earlier, like the most effective aid operations throughout the country. And like, 2/3 of its funding.
7% of their funding last year.
Yeah, a massive amount of their funding just suddenly evaporates. Like from the emergency response room people that you're talking to, what impact is this having right now?
So people began to die immediately because the soup kitchen shut down. There was no money to buy commodities. And I met several women who'd lost children as a result of this. I met one woman who'd lost two children. Her daughter had died first, who was about 18 months old. She went pretty quietly because she couldn't really speak and she didn't really have the energy to cry. That was a couple weeks after the soup kitchen shut down. And then her son died, who was 3, who, loved to play with his brothers and talked about getting a bicycle when he was big, just like other little boys. And this woman had to sit there and watch them starve to death because she had nothing to give them. And none of her neighbors had anything to give them. Children were dying all around her in that neighborhood. There's like 10 children that she knew that died. There's nobody you could ask for anything, no way to get anything. And these soup kitchens have been the very last thing that they could rely on, and they vanished.
So as hunger increases, particularly child malnutrition, one of the more kind of complicated issues with child nutrition when they're suffering from like a kind of severe acute malnutrition. You can't just like give them food. You have to give them specialty foods. One of these specialty foods is called plumpy nut, and it's manufactured in Rhode Island. And I've known about plumpy nut for years and years, covering these issues. I didn't realize just how dire a strait the company that manufactures this plumpy nut is in until I read your article. Can you just explain what's going on with plumpy nut supplies and the role that that particular intervention plays in preventing excess childhood deaths?
Absolutely. So this is what you give to children when they are starving. It's a fortified peanut paste with lots of extra calories and nutrients, and you can just squeeze it out of the pouch directly into their mouths. It's sweet, so they like to eat it. And it's made in America by Americans using peanuts from American farmers. There's a lot of people who are employed up and down the supply chain here. But the contract to ship this paste was cut during the stop work order. And so suddenly, the woman who ran this factory at Odysseus Nutrition, her name is Navin, suddenly had these boxes piling up in her warehouse that she couldn't ship. She's surrounded by this emergency food paste, nearly 200,000 boxes of it. And in the meantime, it's supposed to have gone to Sudan, where children are literally dying on the streets because they can't get this stuff. And that contract was one of the ones that were stopped. Just recently, just now, at the beginning of this month, they began shipping it out. It will still take a long time to ship it all out, and people will have died because that was stopped. That is 100% true, that children died because they didn't get the things that they needed. Now, there hasn't been what we call like a pipeline break, but there has been areas that weren't able to be accessed because of fighting, insecurity. Sometimes hard to move this stuff across the front lines, gets looted. And now she's got like more boxes piling up there that are supposed to go to other war zones. Nobody knows what's going to happen to that. And then she hasn't got any orders at all for the next financial year. So nobody knows what's going to happen to this factory, to the Americans who are employed there. You know, this was a woman who set up a profitable American business, taking products from American farmers to treat starving children all over the world. And suddenly it's all up in the air. Nobody knows what's going to happen to it or if it can even survive.
I mean, to me, it's the suddenness and swiftness of these cuts that is so deeply unnecessary. You know, say you were to make some cuts, you could do so in a way that's sort of measured and deliberate. It was the sudden swiftness of this that, you know, puts like the Plumpy Nut Company in dire straits. Again, at like an American company that you say like warehouses of this emergency food is just piling up and not getting to where it needs. And that to me is just such an ultimate tragedy here.
It's desperately sad that this company is being destroyed and that people are losing their jobs. And it's desperately sad that many children are going to die all over the world because this is happening, because people didn't care to understand the system before they destroyed it.
So, you know, again, this happened so quickly. I'm wondering if in your reporting in Sudan, you are seeing evidence at all of other donors, other donor countries stepping up in a way that at least blunts some of the impact of the sudden and swift withdrawal of American aid. Are you seeing anything to that end?
No, unfortunately not. Many European countries, including the United Kingdom, France, other countries like Canada, have also cut their foreign aid budgets following the US lead. There is no chance that Russia will do it. Russia doesn't do humanitarian aid. China prefers to do commercial loans. And just for sheer size, nobody could match the size of the American donations. And also, there's no time to pivot. You know, when something disappears overnight, you can't just plug that hole of millions of dollars immediately. I would say that the US government did come to understand the life-saving nature of some programs and try to turn them back on. But this is not a tap that you turn on and off. This is a very complicated machine. Things have to be shipped by a certain time. People have to be able to put invoices in and have them paid. And once that machinery was destroyed, it was extremely difficult to turn programs back on.
So, looking ahead, I mean, Sudan is still in this midst of a devastating civil war with no end in sight. It was prior to the cutoff of American aid, the largest humanitarian crisis in the world by the numbers. What sort of compounding impact on Sudanese society and potentially even the trajectory of the conflict do you see stemming from just what apparently will be a staggering number of excess deaths in the coming weeks and months and years ahead?
We talk about the excess deaths, and those themselves, as you say, are a staggering number. But there's also so many more people affected. They are going to run out of kits to help rape victims not get HIV or get pregnant. They are going to run out of the ability to help mothers give birth. They're closing down the supports to the main refugee hospital down in the south. You're going to have a bunch of orphaned children whose mothers are going to die giving birth. Who is going to make sure that those children go to school? Who's going to make sure that they are fed? We are going to have a generation of people growing up with their lives substantially worse than they could have been. And things are already pretty bad up here. We've got the highest amount of conflict since the end of World War II. We have a record number of people displaced globally by conflict, by natural disasters, and that is only going to rise, unfortunately. So what kind of world do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a world where people die easily, where maybe you're going to have a big family because you're afraid that many of your children are going to die, your children are not going to school, somebody's going to come along with a gun and say, come join us, come fight with us? Because I have interviewed those people. I have interviewed captured RSF boys of 15. And when I asked them, where did you come from? How did you get here? Some of them were like, well, I've never been to school. Guys came back to my village with gold. I was part of 700 that got recruited. What else was I going to do? I didn't have a job. So we already have like a very large generation with no hope of a job or an education. Do we want to grow that population? What is that going to do for global stability?
Oh, well, this is also terribly depressing, Catherine. Any question I didn't ask? Any other point you wanted to make? Again, it was such a brilliant article and so necessary.
Thank you. I mean, I would say that it is terribly depressing, but within that darkness, there are points of light. There are people who get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and cycle around their neighborhood desert in the hot sun, giving out medication because they care. There are people who want to build their country. There are doctors who show up to work every day knowing that all they have is a tiny little handful of medicines. Maybe one day somebody will come to their clinic that they can give the right medicine to, and they won't just have to watch them die on the floor. There is enough people out there with hope and with strength and with commitment to build things and make things better. And I guess we can have a choice whether we want to support those people or not.
Katharine, thank you so much for your time and for your reporting as well. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Global Dispatches. The show is produced by me, Mark Leon Goldberg. It is edited and mixed by Levi Sharp. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to follow the show and enable automatic downloads to get new episodes as soon as they're released. On Spotify, tap the bell icon to get a notification when we publish new episodes. And of course, please visit globaldispatches.org to get on our free mailing list, get in touch with me, and access our full archive. Thank you.